Now let's flip the page to page 18 in my Flora of the Pacific Northwest. And we'll continue on. Now we get some questions about our ovary. Is it inferior or superior? This is a very important concept in keying. So to illustrate, let's draw a little example. Okay, you're going to have to imagine this might be a poor example of a ovary here. And let's say I have a style with a stigma coming out of it. If my ovary on the plant I'm looking at is something like this, there's my little seeds there, and my petals are coming out up here. Not a great example here, these would be petals. But my ovary is down here. I'm approaching what we call an inferior ovary. If, on the other hand, I have a situation where I have an ovary, I'm drawing a cross section here so you can see, as if there's placentation of the seeds there and you can see it. And then I have petals coming off and other flowering parts coming out below that ovary. Maybe I've got my sepals coming off here, for example. My stigma lobes. Oh, and I forgot my anthers, of course. Okay, on my horrible drawing here, these are supposed to be anthers. Here I have my ovary coming out above the other flowering parts. And because of that, I call this superior. But flowers can actually be in between these two, as can be the case in the family that we're working with today. So a really important tool to have in your toolbox of keying supplies is a razor blade. Fairly frequently, you're going to have to dissect individual flowers with a razor blade to look at the nature of an individual ovary's position or other characters. Here you can see that the ovary of this plant is more similar to my first drawing. Here's my ovary here. Here are my sepals coming off here. And then here are my anthers. And I think my pistils ended up on the other side. Or my styles and sigmas ended up on the other side of my dissection. But you can see my ovary here is down below the other parts, and so we would call that inferior, or closer to inferior. In this particular example, that's going to make our work, it turns out, a little bit easier. So again, you can see it here. See, our ovary is going to be down below. But with this particular family, they have a tendency to be somewhat in between. And you'll see the key gives us options, just in case you end up there. Okay, so back to the key. In this part of the key, it says ovary fully inferior to nearly so. Well, we like that. Falsely inferior in the genus Gaultheria. Fruit fleshy. 14A works for us today. 15A, corolla strongly gamopetalous. You'll recall that means that the corolla is fused so that the petals don't come off distinctly. That's not the case here. If nearly polypet, then the petals 4 and reflexed. Reflexed meaning turning back. That's also not the case. We have 5 petals. Stamens 8 or 10. Those refer to the genera Gaultheria and Vaccinium, which you may recognize as being in the Ericaceae, another family we'll be covering pretty quickly. 15b, corolla polypet, meaning these petals come off individually, and they did. The petals 5, oh, we like that. Reflexed 2, spreading or erect, they can be any of those, and we like that. Stamens 5 or 12 to numerous, and that's the case for us. We have numerous. 16a says stamens 5, leaves generally palmately lobed, meaning spreading like a palm. We know here we have stamens numerous, so we don't do stamens 5. We have to do stamens 12 to numerous, leaves not palmately lobed. We're in the family Rosaceae on page 185. If you followed along with me, you just keyed out a woody plant into the rose family, the Rosaceae, a very common family that typically is 5 meris with respect to the calyx and corolla, often has numerous stamens, and can have numerous other parts as well. Note that had we gone with ovary superior, we still could have keyed out to Rosaceae down at couplet 19a, where we would have gotten pistils 2 to numerous, stamens 10 to numerous. That's very important for us because it's important to know that within a key, a family key like this, the Rosaceae, for example, and other common families won't just key out once. Sometimes they'll key out in numerous places, since different plants within the families have various characters that may or may not match smaller subgroups. All right, that's Rosaceae, page 185. The last thing I'll do when keying a plant is flip all the way to the description of the plant that I'm interested in, and then that allows me to go through that family. And you can learn a lot in this key from just going to the family and reading the family description. I'm going to read the family description of Rosaceae. Rosaceae is a broad family with a lot of different genera in it. It's an important family where individuals within the family can be herbs all the way up to trees. They can be very diverse, but there are some interesting characteristics of the flowers that are relatively consistent within the family, and so that's what we'll emphasize here. I'm going to go ahead and read the description and try to translate some of the symbology and the abbreviations in this family description. Once you've keyed something to family, it's important to read through the family description and make sure what you've keyed matches the family description. And note that the way your individual plant may have taken you through key couplets in the artificial key, that had you do things like say that the leaves were all simple and never compound. In this family, for example, you can have many compound leaves, or you can have simple leaves that are not divided into leaflets. That's okay. There are other ways to get to this family other than the route we chose, which was more specific to our particular plant. So let's begin. Rosaceae, the rose family. Plants have flowers that are perfect, meaning the male and female parts are present in the same flower. Occasionally, they can be dioecious, meaning there are separate female and male plants. The flowers are either solitary or numerous in the inflorescence, sometimes apetalous, lacking petals. They're generally radially symmetric, like a wheel. They are perigynous to epigynous. That relates to whether flowers are either in between that ovary superior and inferior position, or if they're wholly inferior. The calyx is either 4 meris, 5 meris, or occasionally to 10 meris. More or less united. Our calyx here is not distinct. So when we zoom in, you can see that the calyx lobes, or our sepals, are all united. Often bracteolate between lobes, so there can be tiny little bracts between the lobes. Either adnate to pistil, meaning it's all unified into kind of a dish, or free and saucer-like. Often in this family, there'll be a kind of a saucer formation that consists of the calyx and the ovary that are fused in a perigynous orientation. And you'll see that in other members. You may, if you're keying out other members of the same genus or related tree species, you may see more of a saucer here than I have. The shape can be campanulate to tubular. So look those up in your glossary. Generally disc-lined. Petals 4, 5 to 10 or lacking. Often, though, the most common situation is a 5 meris petals and 5 meris calyx. Stamens can be few or numerous, and in most of the species you're going to see, most of the genera you're going to see, they're going to be numerous. Borne with petals on calyx. So on top of the calyx, we have our stamens coming out. And we might be able to see that in this cross section I have here, where you can kind of see the stamens originating from the top of the calyx. Pistils 1 to numerous and simple, meaning there's a ovary, a single ovary per pistil or something like that. We're not looking at our pistils too closely here, but we did see earlier that we're looking at two pistils here, so we fit within that description. The pistils are generally free of the hypanthium or saucer. Sometimes only one, but if so, they're 2 to 5 carpellate. Carpellate is one of these concepts, again, I'm going to cover in a separate video, but it's important. It has to do with the number of structures in the ovary. If there's only one, then the ovary is partially to completely inferior. The fruit tends to be an achene, follicle, drupe, or pome. These are important distinctions and fruit types. Again, you want to consult your glossary there. That's true for most things in the Rosaceae. So you have pomes, which are like apples. You have achenes, which are like hardened seeds. And we have follicles or drupes. These are types of fruits you typically associate with fruit trees in the rose family. Sometimes in an aggregation with a receptacle and then dry to fleshy. They can be annual to perennial herbs, shrubs, vines, or trees, sometimes armed, like in many rose bushes, with alternate, basal, or opposite. They can actually be opposite, simple to compound, deciduous, or evergreen, mostly stipulate leaves. Oh boy, that covers just about everything. It tells us these leaves can be just about like anything. But occasionally they'll have these little stipules at the base of the leaves, which are kind of helpful. Very common in Rosaceae to have small bracts or small stipules at the base of the leaves. Okay, that's it. Welcome to Rosaceae. The next thing that I tend to do once I've gotten to the family, and something that can be helpful, especially as you're learning, is run through the family key. You'll see that